Hello everyone, and welcome to Let's Program with Scientier, Timeline Program. I believe this is part 12. As you might suspect, we are still working on the timeline overview display, which is really sweet and also extremely time-consuming to make, which is why I was wondering how useful it would be. But now that I've started making it, I think getting it correct will be very useful because it does give a nice overview. Okay, now that I've had a drink of water, I have a few problems that I needed to fix. So the first one was that this does incorrect accounting. In so much as what I need is I need to do dates, and I'm not counting dates. I'm counting pixels that I'm rendering. So I need to think through how to solve this particular problem. Because what's happening is I need to go from the top to the bottom, not to the last date. So I'm going to rename this back to bottom. Except this needs to start at the top, right? This doesn't need to... I'm basically having two pieces of information that I'm tracking. This needs to start at the top, which means that I don't need to add any of the pluses anymore. But right here, I need to add minus top. And then I don't need to add that to that either. Okay. Then I need to come back up to here, and instead of this, this just needs to go back to being y, and up here, instead of last value, that needs to go back to being y. Okay, let's see if that fixes that particular problem. So I'm adding two events, this one at 15, and this one at 500, and I hit F5 again, which does not bring up this display. Okay, so we've gotten an immediate problem, which is that I made those top instead of y. You might notice that top is not where I want these. Y is where I want them. And I just wrote top like a person who wasn't thinking. Happens. It happens. 15, 500. Sorry about the bings, if you can hear them on my microphone. Okay. Now that's going properly, and I can scale this up, and that is indeed going all the way down there because we are going from the correct position. And when I shrink this, it continues to go down to like that point or whatever. So that's really close. Now there is some amount of rounding error, like that 14 being like kind of on point for that 15. There's not a whole lot I can do about that necessarily. I don't feel like I need to add a specific spot for the end of the timeline, just because it's already got the last event's date right there. But I think this is nice to have. So let's see how this handles a split timeline. And let's just put something at 40. And let's add an event to this. Let's have this go to 150. Sure. Okay. So that's obviously doing just that timeline, so I need to do the one that's all timelines. Okay, so you can see this one starts at 0, and it counts down. Like so. So that's really cool. That does what I want it to. Now I'm going to want to do additional stuff with what I'm calling splitters, or timeline splits. And yeah, that appropriately scales as I adjust this scale. So that does work for timelines like that, split timelines, which is really cool. That makes me happy. But you notice that there's a problem. This 0 is not, this is on top of things. and I was having some weird sort problem as well, which I'm not sure what that was about. So I'm going to see if I can figure out what's going on with this weird sort bug first. So it happened when I added 2 events, and I made the last one the smaller value, and this one the bigger value. When I went into this, you'll notice it treats that as the last node, which, aside from making the scaling thing awkward, it also it means that my timeline dates aren't rendering properly, and just all in all, everything's kind of screwy. These are in their appropriate locations because that's based on date, not on render order. But this one's the first node, and that one's the second, which is wrong, and I don't know why that's happening just yet. Now, if I go into, I don't know, here, for example, and I just do that to get it to render, I should be able to come up to displayed timeline and look at its events. And this first event is the one at 500. This one's the one at 15. So the question is, why did that not get updated? Which is obviously the question that I want the answer to. So I've confirmed the bug. The bug exists. I don't need that open right now. So how do I adjust or sort the events within a timeline? Okay, so add event to timeline. Let's go to definition here. When do I sort the timeline? That's a really good question. Okay. So it's whenever I call sort timeline. So I do it when I add an event, which is good. Okay, so the next thing that I need to do is determine how I'm checking for updating the controls. So there's a timeline control right here. And this should, right here, organize timeline controls. Okay, so if this is true, okay, so this can't just do it there. It needs to also go timeline dot. Is that a private? Why is that a? Does this have something that can like fall back into it? Sorry, I'm thinking, or I'm reading right now. So the timeline is the owning timeline, and date change handler, and that organizes the events. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come down here actually into the date change handler, because I don't need it called up in add events or add event, because that should already have kind of whatever its state happens to be. So what I want to do right here is figure out why my timeline sort is private. Make this public. This really does not hurt to be public. And dot sort timeline. Okay, so that should hopefully fix that particular bug. So let's verify that. Add 2 events. This one, put it to 15. This one, put it to 500. I told it to go in here, which I don't need. Okay, and that particular problem looks like it's fixed now. So that's good. So I'm glad to have been able to figure that out. They both took a little while. So at this point, I needed to figure out stuff with a couple of particular situations. The first one is I want to adjust how I'm doing the child timeline stuff. So one of the things that I need to do is come down here and right here with render timeline child. I need to adjust how I'm grabbing positional information for the child. So, where do I take into account that information? Right, this draws that. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to adjust where this X position is relative to like myself, because I actually want to subtract my width, half my width, and I'm going to add an int ypos equals. Actually, let's just do this. This needs to be subline X, I think. Yeah, for subtimeline. So what I'm going to do is very much so adjust how I'm doing this. So I want to add size.height, and then y plus, and then this is going to be subline y. Actually, this should be subline y minus, I'm just going to use root dot spacer for this, just because I want to kind of keep consistent with, ow, bonked my nose, with that spacing. So I'm going to dramatically adjust how I'm doing that calculation. And what that means is I also need to adjust how I'm handling finding the timeline parent X and Y values. So this right here should get spaced out a little bit. So I'm just going to leverage some auto formatting stuff. Okay, because the this information is going to necessarily get more complicated. Okay, so auto format that out to a better sort of size. My X and Y are currently fine, I believe, and this needs to be adjusted. So the way that I want to adjust this is this is my position plus half the width. That's where I want the X to be. And the subline Y, I want to be my position plus, I believe, half my height. Yeah. Plus half my height plus the spacer, which is why I subtract the spacer off in that other spot. So what this is going to do is this is going to make that timeline continue from underneath me, in the middle space underneath me, rather than off of my right. And this is important for a couple of reasons. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, something else that I want to do is this right here, instead of black, I think I want to make it a different color. I'm going to go ahead and make it red for now. We'll see what I want to do later, but I want to make that a different color just that way it kind of stands out better as well. And that will help differentiate this line, which will be black, and then have a red line coming down off of it. And actually, I'm going to come down here to render dates. And I'm going to, actually, I want to public color timeline itself color equals color dot red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as kind of a constant just floating around. So that way when I come down here, well, no, that's awkward. Never mind. I'm not going to do that because like I'm not going to start making objects. It would be a good idea, but I'm too lazy to make it a good idea. So this is going to make the dates red as well. Okay, so then I need timeline parent.x. So this right here is going to need to change. This x needs to be that thing's position. Except, okay, this needs to be right now this is going to be timeline parent dot subline x and dot subline y. Okay. And then I'm going to need to do some adjustment over here because this was not working properly. And I think this y should be fine, but something else that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to add an evaluative spacer so that way when I have a timeline added, I have appropriate width for that timeline. And this was not working to get me the space that I needed either. So I don't know why this was. This was probably occurring because of the sort issue, though, now that I think about it. So now that the sort issue is fixed, this problem that I was running into may be fixed as well. Okay, so I'm just going to test a couple of things at once. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to add an event there. At that thing's relative 0. And now if I look at all timelines, okay, so stuff is not working 100% correctly, but this is dropping down at the right spot. And you can see that that's coming off down there. So that's the event spot coming off. I know it's contrary to kind of how I drew this picture, and according to this picture, I should make all the little connecting lines red and whatnot, but I don't care. So I need to figure out what's going on there, because that's borked. I'm just going to give this a higher date and check this again. Yeah, so that's kind of a red extension coming off of the middle of that. And if I look at just this timeline, you can see this is... Because this event's at 10, there's a bunch of dates that kind of just average out to 0. So I can scroll this back, and those will eventually kind of propagate away. But that's just the nature of that particular so what I might do is look for keyboard modifiers to speed up that rate of change just right now while I'm thinking about it. Decimal divider equals 1,000 if e dot that's gonna be mouse buttons. If what is this? Modifier keys equals keys dot shift divider equals 500 instead. And let's just make this divider. So what that's going to do is holding down shift is going to speed that up. Well, I can make that shift. I can make that control. I'm going to leave that shift for now. And then I'm going to try to figure out why this was going sideways. That doesn't make any sense. Previous is not null. Position should be previous.size.width added on to a root spacer in our position. Timeline parent x. And start off with a spacer. Realistically, I could put these together in one line, so I'm going to. So I don't need that. And then, this doesn't, realistically speaking, need to be a decimal either. This could just be an int. The reason why it was a decimal is because of potentially needing to do shenanigans with other stuff, but this with different orientations. But when I decided to get rid of that, that just like wasn't a problem anymore. Yeah, and I could over here is just like take this and just. I'm just gonna clean this up a little bit because the Y thing is going to be fine. It's the X where it's going to get complicated. So I'm just going to simplify the Y. Because the Y is not going to need to be tweaked with. That has to be a hard number, right? Because that's where it is on the timeline. So that the tweaking that is done to that is done with my PPT value, my pixels per time. And so the rest of this is like set where it needs to be. This is the one that's going to need to have all sorts of shenanigans done to it. So specifically what I'm looking for here is I'm looking for why that one thing was kind of overlapping it the way that it was. And I don't really know why. It's not making any sense to me. Because I take this position, which is based upon this thing, so that shouldn't be affecting anything. And then the spacer obviously gets added on to kind of space everything apart. And if it has a previous, it adds the previous is width and another spacer on. If the previous win and my win are the same, obviously. I don't know what's going wrong here. I'm gonna just add an event here for no reason. I can. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call this S for splitter. I'm just gonna call this guy overlap because that's what he's doing. Oh. Okay, so what I'm seeing right here is overlap is not going far enough. Overlap is getting a little bit of adjustment, but it's not getting an adjustment based on this position. It's getting adjustment based on relative to there or here, if that makes sense. So I need to kind of investigate this a little bit more. I think this will happen with any try part one. So if I bump overlap up to 1, I'm obviously going to have problems, but yeah, well, I'm not going to have problems because like this thing scales out such that it's not a problem, but this right here is working. And as you can see, I have room for more stuff to kind of go next to this guy. But so why is this? Oh, okay, that's why. This needs to equal previous dot x plus that, I think. The reason being that this right here, I don't mind just grabbing this, but this right here is going to be basing it off the same thing. So that's probably going to fix it. Sure, just for thoroughness. Yeah, okay, that fixed it right there. Easy peasy. Simple problem. Okay, cool. Now, where am I at time-wise? Let's see. I think there's, at this point, the only thing that I have left to do with this is to add some spacing functionality. Actually, let's test something really quickly. So that's how quick that moves normally. Yeah, that moves much faster. So if this is like 3, right, and it starts off here, it's like, oh, I can barely move it. That makes it a little bit more aggressive. Yeah, a little bit more aggressive. It's interesting that that's like, because that's that scroll value is just the delta and stuff. So what that tells me is that that's like just a really small number and it takes it a while to get bigger. And it might be that it would be appropriate to add some elaborate stuff to kind of adjust this rate, for lack of a better phrase, on a sort of a scale based upon how big the PPT is. In other words, I think what's happening is the PPT is getting huge, so it may be correct to sort of scale it by the PPT, if that makes sense. Because I suspect what's happening with those really small numbers is I have a PPT that's just absolutely enormous. I can actually check that really easily by outputting what the PPT is. But it might be here. I'm going to do this times 1 divided by root dot ppt. I think. So if the PPT is big, that makes it smaller. And if the PPT is small, I'm going to try this to see what happens, because the PPT can't be 0. And I want to see how that affects the sort of the rate of scaling. So, oh, that makes things slow to non-functional. Okay. I like this idea, but that might be e dot delta times 0 times. So actually, what would actually really help me kind of debug this is actually to go into the render. This right here, and I'm just gonna go u.graphics.drawString root.ppt.toString, comma, font brushes.black. Let's see, client size width minus 15 3. This is just gonna render my PPT because I want to get a feel for this. So I'm gonna, looks like I'm probably gonna end this video on that, and then next video is going to be probably finishing this up with some of that timeline stuff. So this is, okay, clearly I need to give it more than 15, because that is not helping. Let's give this like 100. 100 pixels to render in. Okay. And our PPT is 192. So So that does adjust it, but it kind of... I see. Yeah, so that's really big. And that makes it adjust by a very small amount. So I kind of want the opposite of what I'm doing, which is just timesing it by the root PPT. And just seeing what that does. You know, maybe I will like the effect. Yeah, so that radically adjusts the rate at which it's moving. You see that? So when I start getting into very small values, it goes more and more slowly. So if I make an event at like 500 and I do this, it'll kind of scale similarly. That feels better to me. To where when I'm making the differences between the dates smaller. That kind of keeps a consistent rate of change, if that makes sense. As opposed to like becoming very, very small when this becomes an enormous number like this, right? And it's just like, oh, where is it? And I can be like, oh, well, it's like way up there. And I can like do this. Now, one of the things that you'll notice is this does not adjust that relative position. It is not a zoom. It might be possible to implement a zoom. Like if I hold down Control and start doing this, it will not only adjust the PPT, it will adjust the root position. And I might look into doing that. But for now, there's two things I think that I want to do. Or there's if I do that, I would want to adjust how I'm doing this. Yeah, 6536. Is that what I do? Is I do that. And the reason why I do that, this is what's called a bitwise AND, so it's going to compare the bits. And 65536 is going to be a single bit in a particular spot. So if you converted that to binary, it would be at a particular location, just a single bit on. So this makes it really easy to kind of check these things. I'm doing that so that way I can add zoom with Control down and have Shift work with that. But to get zooming working would be a little bit more complicated. So next time, I guess I might want to get zooming working because I think that would be a really, really nice feature to have. And the other thing that I want to do, I'm just going to come down here. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to implement zoom. And the other thing that I want to do is I want to, for multiple timelines, I want to support it wherein having multiple timelines, split timelines, pushes the split spot, the split node over based upon like the width of the previous timeline, that's its parent timeline, and how many split nodes that parent timeline has. So that way, like if you have a bunch of split timelines, things will kind of get shifted around to kind of accommodate. So there's a bunch of considerations with there. It's probably going to be really complicated, and it might take more than one video, but I kind of want to finish this next time, so we'll see. For now, I'm going to save this. That way people who are a little concerned about that don't have to worry about it. Anyway, until then, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.